the hot tub industry, the pool and spa industry, for the most part, is a pretty small industry in the big scheme of things. I'll give you the flash, quick run through as to how the industry developed. It primarily developed originally in California. A lot of wineries and stuff had barrels, and those barrels got repurposed into the very first hot tubs, right? Which were really just buckets of water. Very little jetting and that sort of thing, usually just an input and an output, so you could heat it up and it was hot. And it was right around the time of the hippie culture and this sort of thing, it hit along with that. And I think originally they were a lot more about partying than they were what they've evolved into. The industry now is a much more lifestyle and health and wellness sort of thing, but back then that's how it started. And then like a lot of things, late or early 70s and the boom of plastics and being utilized and stuff really changed the industry. So now you're able to vacuum form. Before that they would build them like boats. You'd gel coat the inside of a mold, then you'd fiberglass, lay up fiberglass inside of that, and then pop it out, and then you'd, so the colors were all solid, kind of opaque-ish colors originally, and most were round. For a long time, round, and round is still somewhat popular. We don't see a lot of them anymore, but there's still some popularity to that original style. And then we got into acrylics and thermoplastics, which with the advent of vacuum forming, suddenly we were able to design the inside of these things very, very differently. You could put armrests in, you could have lounges, you could have various levels of seating and sizing of seating, and it really opened up. And again, the industry was pretty much dominated through California. The Canadians got involved. Canadian companies, Okanagan Hot Tubs, I guess, was probably one of the first ones in Canada. Beachcomber was another one of those ones from a long time ago. They started making spas in the Okanagan and in Vancouver, and again they're quite simple. I mean, that was about when I started in the industry. They'd been building spas for maybe 10 years or so, and they were pretty basic. You had a pump, you had a heater, you had push air buttons, to activate the pumps, which was really sophisticated back then. You press this button and the pump would turn on. You press another button and the light would come on. And the lights back then were, inside of a plastic housing, and then you'd have a gel cap that fit over top. So if you wanted your tub to look blue, it was the blue light. If you wanted it to be red, it was the red lens that clipped over top. And that was high tech. The outside traditionally was cedar, although in the United States where this all began, redwood was the standard. They were using redwood for pretty much everything, and you have these beautiful redwood cabinets. Some of the big companies, like there was Jacuzzi, Sundance, as these big hot springs, of course, these big, very large companies in the industry back then controlled most of the market. And so, flash forward to the Canadian booming, starting industry, very fledgling industry, and it ended up that there were some unique challenges in this industry. And so when we started, we were working for a manufacturer that my brother and myself, one of the other owners, Darcy Ament, we came to Vancouver to set up a store in Richmond. With a couple of other guys, Brent, who was one of the owners, Jordy, who was originally one of the owners. They had operations in Calgary. They also had, Darcy had two operations running in Saskatchewan as well, and they came from Grand Prairie, those guys. And Dennis Kellner, who's a current president, he was in that group as well. So they all graduated together. That's kind of how we all got involved in this. So we got involved in the hot tub industry, and there was a small manufacturer in Edmonton called Cocoa Beach Hot Tubs that built their own spas. And like most manufacturers that got into this industry, and they looked at the design of what the other manufacturers were doing and basically copied the general design. And what's interesting is that design is pretty much still the standard design, which was basically they'd vacuum form these shells into the various configurations. there was basically two methods. One was you'd fiberglass the back of that for strength, and then the other was they'd use a thicker amount with an ABS bonded to it. They'd vacuum form that, and then they'd use a high density foam. And so there's still much of the industry just foams, and they'd fill the whole thing with foam to give it structural support. It's also a very good way to insulate the spas. The thing for us, though, was we were building spas in Edmonton, and so we used similar design. We'd actually make it out of fiberglass, so we'd pull the acrylic, then we'd fiberglass that, and then we'd foam that after we had plumbed it with the various jets and stuff. We'd foam the shell, we'd foam the cabinet, and then of course you put a lid on top of it, styrofoam, vinyl sealed lid on the top. And that really was it. You know, we had, there's a couple of different ways guys would have like the pumps and controls and stuff would often be outside the spa underneath the step. Another common way was they'd barrier off an area inside the spa. And usually we'd use, again, you could use cardboard, you could use Coroplast. Some people vacuum formed an ABS base in there, and then they put the pumps, the equipment, the heaters, all that stuff kind of in that one side. So one side became very important for access. And it had to be vented because of the heat that the pumps and stuff could cause in that small area. It could actually cause them to shut off. And this is really what led to the Arctic Spas thinking. We had lots of problems with that design. There was a number of things that we didn't like about it. And you know, when we ended up with the opportunity to buy the factory that we'd all worked for, the first thing we went about doing was addressing the complaints that we'd had from customers, really. And because you think about it, our philosophy is that if the end customer is happy, then we're all happy, right? You know, the dealer that sold the spa will be happy, the salesperson that sold the customers will be happy, the factory will be happy, everybody will be happy. So you know, really, from our point of view, the key to success, I think, would be to have the end customer happy. So the easiest way for us to address that was to take the information we got back from them and apply it to the design of the spas. And that, to this day, is still a strong part of the R&D that Arctic Spas does, is basically solving problems, known industry problems or things that could be improved to deliver a better outcome for the end customer. And you know, I'll go into that when we go more into design, but the very first big innovation that we made is we took the insulation away from the shell and we put it on the outside wall. So we started doing this perimeter insulation and putting our equipment inside the insulated area. And this was crucial for a number of reasons, mainly because when you build spas for a cold place, you have to think that, you know, in Edmonton, a good portion of the year is below zero, or below 32 Fahrenheit for the Americans, below freezing. And so having the equipment outside the insulated area could become a problem. You know, especially if it gets really cold. You know, some of the lines are pretty small, and the lines could literally start freezing from the outside in. And if it froze all the way through, like it's like a heart attack. You know, the line bursts and then you have a problem. So that was one of them. Even with hot water, that could actually happen if it's cold enough and windy enough. But the other more likely scenario was these are connected to a very sensitive breaker that's in everybody's home that you get one of these. This is the code. So we see these in our bathrooms and stuff all the time now, and it's second nature to us, just these ground fault interrupters, circuit interrupter, right? And you think about it, the idea is that if something electrical goes wrong with the spa, you want it to shut off so that nobody gets hurt, right? It's a safety feature. And so when you're asking yourself, so how sensitive should I make this thing? The answer to that question is pretty sensitive. Well, the problem with that is that they're pretty sensitive. And so they can sometimes, we call nuisance trip, where, you know, there's a power surge or there's even a brownout, could cause this breaker to trip. And the problem is that customers don't have some sort of alert or an alarm that goes off that says, hey, the breaker tripped, my hot tub is now shut off. right? Sometimes this breaker trips, and most of the time people discover with a towel around their neck. They go out and they lift up the lid and oh man, it's frozen. And I shouldn't laugh. It's a terrible thing to happen, but you can just imagine with the towel around your neck, looking at this thing going, oh dang, what am I going to do about this, right? Well, this happened. This happened to us quite a lot, quite a lot more than we wanted it to. And trying to get in underneath the spas and chip through the foam, because we foam the foam plumbing and stuff, and chipping this, trying to repair any of the fittings that had broken, and then replumbing this, all while it's really cold outside. And we found all kinds of things like, wow, it's really hard to get to what we need to underneath the spa. And in the old days, the people would just cut a hole in their deck and drop the spa in. There was no real cabinetry and stuff like that. And you have to climb underneath these decks and try and fix it. And this foam's all in the way. So we really started to think, what would make it easier to actually repair this if something should happen? But also, how can we prevent this terrible thing from happening? Because freezing a hot tub is going to be one of the worst things you could do to it, because it freezes, its water expands, so all of your plumbing and fittings and stuff all break or crack, and they need to be replaced. And it can even crack the shell itself, and it's just a really hard thing to have to deal with. So we really thought, well, it's going to be important for us to make these so that they don't freeze. And one of I wish it was me that came up with the idea. I'm pretty sure it was one of the other guys on the team. But basically the concept was that if we could use the vessel itself as like a hot water bottle to prevent anything from freezing. So if your breaker tripped, you'd have this hot water bottle inside an insulated box, think a Coleman cooler with a hot water bottle inside of it, right? And the advantage there was now, even on a relatively small tub, you've got 250 gallons of water. It's going to take a long time for that if it's at 100 degrees or 104 degrees Fahrenheit, 40 degrees Celsius. It's literally going to take days. And when we did testing in the giant freezer, the average was 3 to 5 days before the temperature inside that cabinet would be below zero. And that's when freezing could occur. So at the very least, we give people time. The other thing that was amazing about it, though, is we noticed that the spas were actually heating from the waste heat of the motors. So we just disconnected the heaters to see just how much heat these motors produce, because we all knew motors got hot, and if you look right on the label of the motor, their normal running temperature is between 50 to 75 degrees Celsius, considerably hotter than you have the water. So it's essentially a heater whenever it's working. And what we noticed is that it was actually a tremendous amount of energy. And then we started thinking, well, wait a sec, on all these other designs where you've got this enclosed cabinet or underneath a step, the equipment's outside of the insulated area, what I call the American style design that originated in the US. That having that equipment outside of the insulated area of the vessel means that the heat, the waste heat that's generated from those pump motors is lost to the environment. Right? So and you can tell any spa that you look at, if it's got vents on it, just ask yourself, what are the vents for? And you're going to think, well, it's to vent heat. And then ask yourself, if we're trying to make this water hot and you've got heat venting out, then it makes sense that you could use that somehow to heat this. And part of our thinking is that spas cost more to run in a cold place than they do in a warm place. You live in California, the variance of temperature isn't that much. You don't have to put a lot of money into heating your water. But when you live in Edmonton, and it's minus 40 outside, it takes a lot to keep that. So we want to make sure, A, it's not cooling off, so it's going to be really insulated well, but we also want to use any bit of heat that's available. We want it to heat the spa, not waste it to the environment. And that was the beginning of this perimeter insulation, which now they call free heat. And it really is free heat. It's recovered heat is what it is. And it's being used to heat the spa. And so that back and forth benefit, where if the power goes out, you've got this engineered freeze protection. It was funny, all of when we started talking about freeze protection, all of the electronics manufacturers, so we went away from the air button designs, when electronics and stuff started coming out, the electronics now were running everything. And so they came up with this electronic freeze protection. What electronic freeze protection is when the thermostat says, hey, this water is getting cold, turn the jet pumps on to prevent freezing. And at first I thought, that's brilliant. That makes a lot of sense. If ever the temperature gets down, the jet pump will turn on. Except that when you think about the real problem, which is these things lose temperature when they're off, right? A breaker's tripped or something has shut the electricity to this thing off, in which case the electronic freeze protection is not able to function. You cannot turn the electric motor on if you don't have electricity. And so we realized, wow, this design really is a much better design. But it was clear, it was important enough that all of the other manufacturers still put in this effort to put in freeze protection because they realized it was a value to have this. But it's not the same as being able to use this. It doesn't give you the time. And the true statement is it's very rare for your heater to fail and not trip the breaker. So the only time the water would really get cold is if you didn't have power for some reason, right? So having an actual engineered solution as opposed to an electronic solution is really, really valuable. Now, we sell these spas all over the world into lots of warm places, and one of the benefits of good insulation is that it works in cold places and in warm places. It's a win-win situation. We do have occasionally, when we have people looking at our design, there's concern that, hey, won't it overheat? Well, the truth is by not putting the insulation on the shell, the fiberglass is glass. So the heat transfers into the water very, very easily. And in fact, it works based on thermodynamics. If the water is cooler than the air temperature inside the cabinet, then it will start absorbing that heat. It literally acts as a heat sink, pulling the heat out. If the air temperature is cooler than the water, then that works in reverse. And that's what gives you the hot water ball effect, and it radiates, protecting all of your stuff. And so this natural physics works extremely well for the purpose of what we're doing. And there's a bunch of side benefits. So not only are we able to have the freeze protection, not only are we able to recover the waste heat of the motors and use that to augment the costs and lower the costs and augment the heating capability of your spa, it also took all of this insulation that was normally covering all these pipes and stuff, and those are open now. So if you have a problem, it's very easy to diagnose. And in the beginning, we put an access door on every side, but then you look at these things and you realize, well, wait a sec, a lot of the stuff is in the corners. So if the access panel's in the middle, you still got to kind of dig in there. So then we started doubling up the panels so that you had access all the way around this thing. So the idea is that if anything went wrong over time, you get little problems. Nothing major. It's the same as in your home. If you use your faucet for 15 years, sometimes the washer wears out and it starts to drip. Well, the same thing can happen with any of these seals that we put to use jets or fittings and stuff like that. That stuff can over time deteriorate and it can cause a small leak. Well, that seems like a small thing, and on our tubs it really is a small thing. You can fix it yourself in most cases, but if you imagine the other way that spas are made, when that's all foamed in, how do you know where that leak is coming from? How do you know if it's in one place or in multiple places? There's no real easy test for us to do to find that, particularly when they fill them right up with foam. It's like you're trying to find a drip inside of a sponge, which I tell people is harder than finding a needle inside of a haystack. A drip in a sponge could be anywhere. So the tradition when we first started diagnosing these problems is we'd pour food coloring into the water, wait for it to seep out, and then you'd tip the spa up. If you had access doors, you'd take the access panels off and go from the side, and you'd kind of follow the trail of these things. The problem is that because of all the plumbing and stuff inside the spa, you can have a leak in one spot up here, and it'll drip and follow the line all the way around to the other side and come out there. So that's where you'd start chipping. So you start chipping foam, all the while trying not to hook a line or otherwise, and it just became such a terrible thing to do. And I think for us, we had done this in adverse conditions outside and went through this, and customers hated it, we hated it, and we just thought, there's got to be a better way. And removing that insulation from the shell was that better way. It just made access so much easier. It made upgrades easier. If, customer says, "Oh, I don't want that ozone system," or "I don't want that special lighting package. I don't need it," right? But then they decide, or maybe I don't think I want that many jets, and then they decide afterwards, "Look, I actually want to have those more jets, or I want to have that optional system," and they could now do it. We could send a guy out. Because we could access anything, we just tie right into the system, and we literally designed this boss so that upgrading was easy, because we figured people's needs will change over time. But what it's done is it's actually made it so that our product is a product that can last as long as you want it to. And I think that's really important, because one of the things I've noticed, my evolution from being involved with the factory to having my own stores, is when we have our own stores, we started seeing, and the industry is old enough now that there's, most spas are lasting 10, 15 years. Every now and then you get someone that's had 20 years or 25 years out of their spa. But what I've noticed is that we're taking these to the landfill, and that's a lot of stuff to throw into a landfill. And what I really love about this design is that it means that you never have to do that. We always are, if we can find one, we're happy to buy our own product back, because we can turn it into this year's model just by, a little bit of work on the cabinet. This beautiful cedar, it lasts forever. You can turn this to be 90% new, and then any of the components and stuff in the spa, easy to access. We can put in the latest technology and stuff into it. It's just, it can be that classic car that's been modded and hot rodded, and it's a 50-year-old car. Well, you'll be able to do the same thing with these, because the shell has a lifetime warranty on it. It's built in such a way that it literally could outlast us, right? So I think that is a change in our industry. I think that the old way of doing it, or the old design, it served the industry well. I mean, most of the industry still uses it. But the fact is, I think more and more people are going to be concerned about, do I want to throw this away in 15 years and get another one, or 10 years or less, depending on how, I was talking to a buddy the other day about televisions. The television that my parents had, it's like it's big, like it was a coffee table and a television sort of thing, right? And I remember that thing, and I don't know, it went to kids and grandkids, and I'm sure the thing's probably still working now. It's just a matter of where it's progressed down to, which kid has it. But it was amazing to me that now we buy these flat screen televisions and stuff, and the warranty is a year, and shortly after the year's up, they start failing, because I use them in all the showrooms to display stuff instead of signs. They're more effective. Not to mention you can use them as a television and that sort of stuff too, good for training or whatever. But I noticed that they fail. They fail, and there's this kind of mentality of built-in obsolescence. And I think in a lot of industries that's kind of taken the place. Like, nobody fixes things anymore; they just replace things, right? And to a certain extent, that's hit our industry as well. But at least when you're replacing components, it's a lot smaller impact on the environment than when you're replacing the whole thing, right? And we've spent a lot of time trying to make it so that components last much longer. That's been a big part of R&D. That's why we have our own jets, our own jet design, which solved a known problem, because jets used to fail, especially with the water chemistry, So this idea of constant, never-ending improvement is really a thing that's been embodied by the ownership team of Arctic Spas, as well as the dealers that represent those spas. I sold my stake in the company, more than a decade ago, and I'm still their customer. I love this company enough that I came back and still got involved, and it's a product I can stand behind, because I know that we share the same philosophy. and that is that if we can make things better, we do. And we spend a lot of time and effort trying to make things better. Our big kick for the last 10, 15 years has been to try and make it easier for people to own one of these things. Whether that's building spas that can fit into more places, or designing product that meets more and more needs, special needs and things like that. But we're constantly looking at ways of improving the product that we make to deliver better massage, to deliver better therapy overall, to add fitness into the product so that it becomes less of a luxury party item and more of a how can we make our lives better. And we really believe that having an Arctic spa in your life will change your life for the positive. You'll be happier, you'll be healthier, and you'll be living a better lifestyle. One of the things I talk about quite a bit with people is the fact that the hot tub is kind of a digital detox. You can get away from the screens. Because I don't know if your family's like mine, but I've got teenage kids. When they're glued to their phones or iPads or computers, it's such a convenience. And I see myself, I'm as a business person, where I'm always on my phone doing things. Well, what's really great is that when I'm in the hot tub, it's my time out from that. I can escape that. And I can actually talk to my kids. We talk about having dinner, but a lot of times I've had to say to them, okay, everybody devices off for having a dinner together, because you can't be watching a movie and you can't be watching your thing and I can't be on my phone answering emails, and we call this a family dinner, right? Owning the hot tub has changed that for us. That's our spot, and we use it almost every day. But it's nice. Sometimes when I want to connect with one of my kids, I can sit out there and I can have a talk. And I mean, we've had some marathon times in the hot tub where we just sit in it and talk, and it really impacts me to know that we can have that kind of effect on a person's personal family life and human connection. And that again it inspires us to be better and to build a better product that can deliver more to our customers. And I'm really proud to have been a part of this and to continue to be a part of the development of the product. So I think as you get to go through the videos that we're going to produce to try and educate you on kind of the why behind why we do what we do. That I've given you the why our design in this video, like how did we end up there? It was largely because of the environment that we were selling most of our spas into, which was really, really cold places. So it led us down a rabbit trail that turned into these innovations that I think really I thought would have changed the whole industry a lot more. I was always wondered why one of the bigger companies didn't just say, "Frig, that's a great idea. We should do that too." They just didn't. And the only thing I can think of is that it's really hard to build spas like this comparatively. And so I think that dissuades them from doing it. Not to mention they'd have to completely refit their factories to be able to do it the way we do. Whereas for us, we grew and evolved with this product, so our whole factories and stuff have been set up with this concept in mind right from the beginning. But even then, the biggest companies in our industry are owned by Fortune 500 companies. They're big companies. They could easily come in and copy the basic design of what we've done, and yet they don't. Which, it shocks me. It shocks me that it hasn't been done. We've had a few smaller manufacturers attempt to do a similar way, and actually those smaller manufacturers, I think, do rather well by utilizing the design. It's a good design. It's just difficult. It's a difficult design to manufacture, and it's expensive. I think, we have to, I know on shell thickness especially, we have to use a lot more stuff to make it strong enough to be able to do what we do. That's why we have top and bottom rails and a forever floor and all these things, is because this has to be really strong for this whole thing to work. And we can't rely on the foam to do that for us. Foam is excellent at adhesing things and putting things together. It does work at keeping a lot of structure, and so we use it strategically. But it's, when you fill them completely up with foam, and you take away that heat transfer that can happen, it really takes a lot away. And we're discovering it now as energy prices and stuff go through the roof. This thing being more efficient and being able to use every bit of waste energy to heat the spa, that's a big savings, because as the price, after you buy the spa, the single biggest expense is going to be running it with the power. And so we want to make sure that that's always going to be top of mind in our design. How can we make these things more efficient? How can we make them deliver more and cost less from an energy consumption point of view? And we do that. And on all of the spas, all of the top custom series Arctics, you can track all of that. It's all online. We've got all of this information and data being collected online, so you can see exactly how much it costs for your pump to run if you really want, right? But you get that readout, and we're proud to do it. When we want people to see our stuff is way more efficient, and that's why we show you, right? So we're going to go through all of the little things that we do differently. That this being in the northern climates of Canada, why we did the things that we are doing, the things that we are doing, and why we came up with those ideas, and what's the benefit to you as a customer. And I hope that this journey together will be something that you enjoy, and that you can get educated about spas in general. And my promise to you is, at the end of it, you'll know a whole lot more about hot tubs than you ever thought you'd want to know. But we believe that the more educated you are on the product itself and the whys behind what we do, the more likely you'll buy an Arctic spa, because you'll agree that our thinking is sound. And we hope that you will add a hot tub to your lifestyle. Whether it's a hot tub from us or any other company, I think having a hot tub in your life is a good thing. It will add value to your house. It will add value to your lives, most importantly.